It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to U of L Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. So glad you're joining us. Hope you'll stick around for the next 30 minutes or so for the show that's about all things U of L. Got a couple of guests today. We're going to talk about cancer, and we're going to talk about robots. A little bit later in the show, Karen Kaiser is going to talk about couples who are facing cancer together. What are the problems that they face, and what things do they run into when they're facing cancer together? And we'll talk to her a little bit later in the show. But first, robots, as you know, are becoming much more lifelike. They're beginning to look human as well as perform a lot of human tasks. Dan Popa just came from Texas to the University of Louisville. He deals with the robots. He's developing robots, and he'll be here to talk to us about robots. In fact, we've got that interview with Dan Popa right now. Here with Dan Popa, who is an engineering professor in the School of Engineering, the Speed School of Engineering at the University of Louisville. He's the endowed chair in advanced manufacturing and the head of the Next Gen Systems committee or search team. What are you, a research team?
Research group, yes.
Research group, the Next Gen Research Group, right? What is that?
So essentially it's a name for my lab, recognition of the fact that we work as a team. I've gotten a lot of students involved in the lab activities over the last 10 years, under this banner of the Next Gen Systems Group.
Okay, so you work with robotics.
Yes.
Describe what you do.
So we are looking at research in robotics, which if you're doing research in anything, it means you have mastered the current state of the art and you're trying to push the boundaries for the robots of the future. Mm-hmm. So one way that we are doing that is to, on one dimensional scale, we work with robots that are smaller and smaller, micro robots, nano robots. And on the other end of the scale, we work with robots that are friendlier, closer to humans, that will be able to cooperate with humans.
Now, I've been over to your lab, and I've seen the robots that are closer to humans, as you put it, and they're almost freakishly human a little bit. What do you tell people when they walk in, they say, well, what are you working on? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to get to? How good can robots be?
Right. So I think what we're trying to convince people is that robots will end up being very useful in your everyday life, and that's going to happen fairly soon. And so just
fairly soon meaning what?
Meaning
2 years, 10 years?
Within the next decade.
Okay.
You are going to need your personal robot the way you need your cell phone.
No, that's not going to happen. You really think that's going to happen?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So your car is a robot if it drives itself, right? And perhaps you can have some help, hired help or free help in your household for several chores that you may not have time to attend to.
Well, it's not free. You're going to have to buy the robot, right?
Correct, yeah. And you may want to gift a household robot to your parents to make it easier for them.
So that's going to happen in the next, what?
There are, in the next decade, there are numerous companies that have top secret projects in that direction right now. So I think somebody's going to succeed.
And what are some of the projects that you're working on right now?
So one of the projects we have is to create the next generation nursing robot that will help with, essentially help nurses better care for patients. These robots will be able to interact verbally with or converse with the patient and bring them some items, perhaps that the patients are not able to get on their own.
So they're like nurses' aides? Is that the right term, or can they not do quite as many things as a nurse's aide in a nursing home?
Not nearly as many. And the idea is not to replace nurses, but to help nurses because they're very busy and they don't have time to care for patients the way they should.
So if I were in a hospital and one of these, you're trying to develop a robot to help in my care in the hospital, what types of things do you hope that robotic nurse's aide could do?
If you are a good patient, then this robot will, bring you the remote control, tell you something about the news of the day. If you need care, it'll call the right person to help you. It'll keep track of your vital signs, by taking measurements once in a while.
So could this
But
be?
if you're a bad person, then it'll physically restrain you from getting out of bed. For instance, if
If you're not supposed to be getting out of bed?
Yeah.
Okay. So it could have some physicality to it.
Correct.
Could it also, if, for instance, I'm supposed to be ambulatory and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm supposed to walk every 2 hours or something down the hallway, could the robot help me walk down the hallway or help me get up and go to the bathroom, those kinds of things?
Correct. So that's the second application. It's called patient walker.
Okay.
So it'll serve as a patient walker. Right now, that function is done by nurses or nurses' aides, and they cannot do it at the frequency necessary for individual people. Also, people are more likely to accept help from a robot than from another person. It's a matter of pride. Many nurses report this.
Okay.
And finally, even if there is a nurse helping with the ambulatory recovery exercises, there's usually a paraphernalia of medical equipment. It has to go down the aisle also. So the robot at least can do some of that, can take over some of that burden.
And how far away are you from creating these nurses' assistant robots?
So the technology exists today to do that, to do what I described to you, except the robots are very, very expensive, not that reliable, so they don't succeed 100% of the time, maybe 85% of the time, which is not that good. It means,
You're dropping a glass of water or
right.
something like that, right?
Quite frequently. So,
Okay, well,
so
yeah,
for
that's
this
not good.
technology, needs to be very reliable and also a lot less expensive.
So that's what you're working on.
So we're working on right now a prototype nurse assistant that's much, much cheaper than what is available on the research market right now.
Okay, we're talking with Dan Popa from the University of Louisville Speed School of Engineering. I saw where you got a grant recently to work on the skin of robots, presumably to make them look like humans, right? Or not?
No.
All right, well, you tell me.
So the goal of that work is actually to endow robots with a sense of touch so that
Also,
they
they
can...
have sensors in there?
Right. So the skin is not just for aesthetic purposes, but also to indicate whether a human is in close proximity or another object in the environment is in close proximity. That's one of the senses that today's robots are missing. And those are very important for deployment in human households or in the medical environments in hospitals.
So when you say using sensors, so is the robot, you're developing a covering for the robot that has sensors built in?
Correct.
Or what?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we call that robot skin.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. So it's not skin to make it look like a human, like the one robot. What's the guy you got in your lab? Philip. That's right. That you talked to back and forth. He has skin that's freakishly human-looking, by the way. But I think people would probably want to know. So, what are the sensors doing? You said they could detect a human whether they're in the room, but is it more for touch purposes?
Purposes, correct. And we have developed pressure sensors. They detect pressure. We've also played with accelerometers, which can detect vibrations, so tapping. And you could also embed non-human sensors in there. Temperature is another modality of interaction, but you can embed things that can see, let's say, in the dark, infrared sensors. So you can imagine robots that have extra human abilities as well.
So is this to get robots so they don't bump into things? Is that essentially what it does?
In particular, in this case, so that they don't bump into people, and they can help people during physical co-manipulation tasks.
Are you also working with the military on some stuff that you can talk about?
Yeah, no. So we were part of the DARPA Robot Challenge several years ago that is working to develop human two-legged or multi-legged mobile robots for the use in the military, the Atlas robot in particular. So I was part of that project about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Currently, I'm more focusing on civilian application, so to speak.
How far away are we, Dan, till robots take over our lives, take all of our jobs, and so humans have nothing left to do?
So, good question, yeah. So I tend to think that that's not going to happen. What I think will happen is that the robots will take away jobs that
Automated factories.
Right, that maybe not everybody wants to do. And it will free us to pursue other things. There's no telling what, but or they would just be there to help us. So in the scenario of robots in factories, then I can see how robots have replaced a lot of the manual workforce. But if you think about robots deployed everywhere, every person will have a robot. Who's going to repair these robots? Who's going to program these robots, and so on? We will need a new workforce that will do that.
So humans would do that. So kids
Absolutely.
coming out of the speed engineering
Absolutely.
school at the University of Louisville will be fixing those robots.
Absolutely.
What will robots never be able to do other than repair themselves? What are some of the things that you think humans 40 years from now will still be doing that robots just won't be able to do?
That is a very it's a loaded question.
Oh, why is it loaded?
So there are people especially in the artificial intelligence community, that predict superhuman abilities in reasoning, in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most basic things that we can do that robots cannot do right now is just very simple manipulation with our, dexterous manipulation. That's still a challenge for robots. With your hands, yes. Our hands are designed a lot better than robotic hands.
Okay.
And so if you think of that as a basic human trait, 40 years from now, robots probably will be better. I'm not sure if they will approach the dexterity of human hands.
And as I mentioned earlier, Philip, the robot you have in your lab, looks an awful lot like a human. Will there be any time in the future, you think, where robots will look so much like humans that we won't be able to tell them apart?
Right. So that's another that's another loaded question, and of course the sci-fi community is predicting that. A lot of enthusiasts are excited about that. I'm not too keen about that. I think the goal is, again, not to replace people, but to help people. So robots don't have to look human. That's interesting, but they don't have to really.
They don't have to look that way.
That's right.
Like you and I. Okay.
That's right.
All right, Dan Popa from Speed School of Engineering at the University of Louisville, the Endowed Chair in Advanced Manufacturing, and with Next Gen Systems Research Group. Appreciate you being on the show. When one partner has cancer, how does it affect the relationship he or she has with their spouse or partner? Well, Karen Kaiser is a professor in the Kent School of Social Work and the LaRocca Chair of Oncology Social Work in the Kent School of Social Work. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mark, for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, you've been at UofL how long now?
Now it's 6 years.
Oh, has it been 6 years already? Wow.
Yes.
So the chair was formed, the oncology chair was 6 years ago?
Yeah, 2011 I came.
Okay, well, very good. Well, let's talk in general terms about, how couples deal with cancer. If you got one partner has cancer, what are the dilemmas and the problems that they have to work through when one partner has cancer?
Okay, well, to begin with, cancer, many of our cancers now are pretty treatable, and people can live a long time with the cancer. But we find that as they're going through treatment, the side effects of the treatment can affect them enormously in many different domains of their life. And I like to look at their stresses in terms of medical stresses, the physical things that are going on, the social in terms of
Cost.
Yeah, the cost, the practical, the the emotional, the depression. Possibly they could experience anxiety and so on. So there are a lot of stresses that the patient's feeling, and often though our cancer care providers focus mainly on the patient to the exclusion of the partner. But our research shows that the partner can be just as distressed, in some studies, more distressed than the patient himself or herself. So that's why it's very important to look at more the system and not just the patient alone, but this partner that is also suffering. Because we know that when people are under stress and have perhaps life-threatening illness diagnosed, that they tend to turn to their close, intimate partner.
Right.
But the partner is also experiencing, that stress. So it becomes, even kind of more of a burden for the partner. So what you have in terms of how it affects the relationship is that often you see partners, the patient and the partner, kind of buffering the other person. I don't want to be a burden to them, so I'm not going to tell them how I feel and the distress and the emotions that I'm having. And it almost becomes like this conspiracy of silence, that they're not communicating, their stresses to each other, and therefore they can't really approach the stress, as a couple. And so the first step is kind of like helping them see that it's what we call a we disease, that it's a stress that's affecting both of them, and that in order to cope with it, they have to come together and think about, how are we going to approach this?
You need to confront it head on.
Exactly. And communication is so key to it. I mean, in all the work that I've done with interventions and trying to help couples, they come away and they say to me that the most important thing with our interventions is that we got them to talk about it, that they were thinking about all these things at home but weren't sharing them for fear of how it would affect the other. But having kind of that third person there to facilitate a discussion in a very, kind of secure, safe environment, help them to open up and be vulnerable with each other.
Is a lot of it a case that you just don't feel good when you have cancer, and so you just, when I don't feel good, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just don't like people around. I want to handle it myself. Is that what a lot of cancer patients do, and then they just can't bring their partner in, and then their partner doesn't know, hey, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how I'm supposed to act, what I'm supposed to do.
Yes. Some people would like that distance, and I just want to be alone, and I don't want to talk about it, but others may not, and that's why I'm saying the communication is so important. I don't know if it's a gender difference or whatever.
Maybe.
But
yeah, I'm a guy, so
yeah. But
we just like to be
a
left
lot
alone.
of women, want somebody to be there for them. And one study that I did with mothers who had cancer, one of the types of support that they rated the highest was support from their intimate partner, just being there for them. So they didn't really have to do anything. They didn't have to fix anything. They didn't even have to talk much, but just to be there for them. So, but, other people, like I said, might want to be alone. So that's why the communication is so important.
Right. And when you talk to couples, what do you tell them? I mean, you said that one couple said the best thing was just getting us to open up and talk about it. But what do you tell them when they walk in and say, we're really struggling here, financially, stress, and we just don't know what to do? They come to you. What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to figure out what's the source of their distress. I mean, where are they feeling the most stress? And I often will ask that in an initial assessment in terms of what has been the most important change. I'll say change instead of stress since the diagnosis. And then we can start with whatever they are feeling the most stress about and how each appraises that stress and how might be the best way to go about mitigating it. And another thing that in the beginning that couples will talk about is that they're just, at the diagnosis, they're just reacting on, whatever comes to them, they're reacting to it. It's emotional. So, but they don't sit down and really figure out, like, how are we going to manage the work of the family? How are we going to manage, the fact that maybe if say it's a woman with breast cancer, the husband has to go to work, and then she's not around to maybe pick up the kids, and she, because she has clinic, and how is she going to get to the clinic appointment? So there's a lot of work that needs to be distributed and delegated and worked out. So it's very practical, but often couples don't talk about that. They just react, and then they forget about, the kids don't, they're stuck at school, nobody's picking them up. So it's sitting down and let's look at, all the things that you have to do and start, who's going to do what and, how you can manage it. So it's very practical, but it's a way to start, and it's a way to talk about the stress that they're feeling.
We're talking with Karen Kaiser from the Kent School of Social Work at the University of Louisville, talking about couples and how they deal with cancer. You've done a study that dealt with rectal cancer and how that impacts intimacy and couples. And is it any different than the way couples who are facing breast cancer or liver cancer or something else? Is that any different?
No, this particular study, and it's ongoing, is looking at how couples cope with impaired sexual functioning, because with rectal cancer, but also with some of the other ones that you mentioned, like head and neck and so on, it can affect, or prostate is another good example, it can affect their sexual functioning. And so we are looking at, in particular, not, how we can maybe change their sexual functioning, but how they deal with it, how they manage it, because when...
What do you mean, how they deal with it? How they can still be intimate without having sex?
Exactly.
Okay.
There are, so basically when you have a type of cancer like that, what happens is that, perhaps if the man has it, he's going to have erectile difficulties. For a woman, she might experience vaginal dryness and some pain upon intercourse. So what you have to do is figure out, how can they still be intimate with each other, more maybe on an emotional, but also a physical basis, and more flexible in terms of how to achieve that, because they may not regain the type of sexual functioning that they had before they had the treatment for the cancer. So that's basically what we're working with.
Is that a real emotional thing for couples who have an active sex life, then they get hit with cancer and they can't return to the way they were? Is that tough for them to deal with emotionally?
It really depends. And there's this one interesting study about whether the cancer patient valued their sex life for just physical pleasure or for emotional intimacy or for both. And, what they found was that when the patient, only saw their sex life as like something that gave them pleasure, and then they no longer could have that, they were probably more depressed and distressed than those that had originally thought, well, I love the physical, but it's the emotional closeness that I like. So
there's a difference, yeah. Okay. What about when folks get cancer, family gets cancer, and the financial toll? Is that a big stress point for these families? Yeah,
right now it might be the number one stressor for the families. I just finished a study with colleagues where we looked at the consequences of the financial hardship on the family. This was not during the treatment or diagnosis. This was later. And I'll tell you, it is devastating. And we had a few couples in the study, but definitely I could see that the couples handling it, again, a similar thing happened. The partner, tended to try to buffer the patient from the stress of the finances. They take over it. Yeah, let me handle it. But, the long-term effects, some of these people, this is before the Affordable Care Act, so they didn't have, the Kentucky Exchange to rely on. They were probably all had private insurance. But what happened was that when the patient lost their jobs because they had couldn't go to work, their physical functioning, they lost their insurance. And when they lose their insurance, the partner might try to pick it up if he or she were working, but that made it more difficult because their insurance policy or their payments would be higher. So then, what you have is that it can be a spiral. It can then lead to bankruptcy, or it can lead to a foreclosure on your house, and you lose your house. And, we had some that had to be, it was temporary, but they were homeless at times. Wow. So it's devastating.
Tough, yeah.
And that would be kind of my next study, is to look at, how they manage it as a couple, because that's one that, there isn't a lot of control over. And unfortunately, I have to emphasize that, people who work in a cancer care center and they really need to start looking at how to help people with the financial piece, because it's devastating, and it surely doesn't help them in recovering and and having a quality of life after they get treated for cancer. I mean, some of them would probably say, "Why did I go through all this?"
Really?
Yeah. And I even know some people that made decisions not to have treatment because of the financial hardship that they saw was going to
Hit
lead
their
to.
family? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. So what would you suggest? I mean, you said, cancer centers like the Brown Cancer Center at UofL, their job is to cure people, find cures and cure people of cancer. But maybe they aren't taking as good a look at the financial burden that these folks and the emotional toll it takes on these folks.
Yeah, and they have to start early. They have to start at the point of the diagnosis, because they know, how serious the diagnosis is, the prognosis. They know, what the treatment's going to be and what that might lead to in terms of their ability to stay employed and so on. So they have to start at the beginning and do an assessment and kind of screen for these people that they can, see down the road they may have financial problems. So that's a start, but they also need to have financial kind of consultants or advisors there to help them, and because the patients themselves don't know what the options are out there, and they really need help in kind of navigating all that.
I got you. All right, we're talking to Karen Kaiser from the Kent School of Social Work. We got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes left here. A couple quick questions. What do those of us who have friends with cancer not think of when a friend or loved one has cancer? What are some of the things that we should be thinking of, but we don't?
Well, I mean, first of all, like I had said earlier, how the family, how the people around them are doing, because they're going to need the support just as much probably as the patient themselves. So giving them a relief, letting them...
Taking the kids off for a couple days, picking up the kids from school.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or coming in and taking care of the kids so that the couple can go out. And we were just talking about financial things. I mean, what we find that with a lot of these people that had the financial hardship, they would eliminate from their lives doing fun things, entertainment, going on trips. So if you can help them with those things that they probably have cut out because they just can't afford them, that's great. I mean, that's a type of thing that would be very helpful. Very
good. And if folks want to contact you, are you open to having folks from the public just send you an email or
sure,
call
definitely.
you? So how do they track you down?
They can send an email, and the name is Karen, Karen, and the last name is Kaiser, Kayser, and I have a Louisville email address.
Yep.
And
just go on Louisville's main webpage, louisville.edu, punch in there the search engine, Karen Kaiser, Kayser, and they'll track you down.
Okay,
all right,
great.
Karen, appreciate you being on the show. We always try and wrap up the program with a Did You Know segment, a little trivia about the University of Louisville. So here's today's trivia. Did you know, and you should know this because it's the Kent School of Social Work, did you know the Survivors of Torture Recovery Center, federally funded through the Kent School of Social Work, has served 250 refugee survivors of torture from around the world and is the only torture treatment center in the Mid-South region of the United States. So another good thing going on at the Kent School of Social Work. There you go. All right, thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. It airs on Monday and Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock after Ramsey and Rutherford. Also on weekend mornings on Saturday and Sunday. We have a little replay. You can also catch some of the shows on TV, on Metro TV, which is the government access channel here in Louisville, as well as KETKY, the Kentucky channel. Again, thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert. Go Cards!